Sacred Sites with Steve Ray, here on Morning Joy, where truth matters.
Last week, we were getting ready to get on the bus and leave for the Mount of Beatitudes. So we got the whole idea of what it's like to get up in the morning the first day, see the sunrise and the fishermen. So we want to beat the crowd. So we're going to leave at 7:30, but everybody has to be on the bus 10 minutes early because we're actually going to leave at 7:29, especially the first day. We make a point because everybody, and they thank me later for being so punctual about everything. Everybody, that's one of the great things. Thank you, thank you, thank you. But anyway, because there's 4 million tourists, but in the year 2022 to 2023, there was 4 million tourists. There's only 8 million people that live in Israel. So 4 million tourists is half the people that live there. So you got to beat the crowds. That's what our goal is. So, and by the way, we'll be returning in December this year over Christmas break if anybody wants to go with us. Okay, so first thing on the bus, we give our whisper sets. They're you put them in your ear. We got a microphone that makes it really easy. People can hear what we're saying, so we hand those out. They're yours for the rest of the trip. Take good care of them. Batteries last for the whole time. We give everybody rosaries because you're going to want to touch the rosaries at all the holy sites. And since we're going to pray on this pilgrimage that we're going on, all the mysteries of the rosary at the place where they happen, we're going to pray one at the Mount of Beatitudes for the proclamation of the kingdom. So make sure you bring your rosaries and a water bottle because it could be 80, 90 degrees sometimes there. We don't want you passing out from heat stroke or dehydration, so you got to bring your water. You don't need a camera. Don't worry about bringing the camera because I'm taking pictures all the way through. I make a movie for everyone. At the end of the day, there's a YouTube movie I upload for all the family and friends, so you don't even need your camera, really, if you don't want to. So now we're heading out, and we're taking off in the bus. Everybody, it's just a palpable excitement. This is the first day on a pilgrimage. They had a good night's sleep. They're ready to go. The Mount of Beatitudes is right ahead. You can see it up on the hill, actually. You can see the little dome of the church up there. But on the way, we stop and point out Magdala, because Magdala is, guess who was born there? Mary Magdalene. People think that Magdalene is her last name. It's not her last name. It is the place where she's from. It's really Mary. If you were to say it back then, as Miriam of Magdala. That's where she was from, and it's a city. So we point that out as we go along. And then you got to watch out the windows because there's so many interesting things to see as we're driving. You don't just sit there and look straight ahead and go, and you've got to be alert and observant. And one time when we were driving around we're going up these switchbacks, kind of going up into the Golan Heights, up into that area, the Upper Golan. And one time we saw a whole flock of antelope, and they were surrounded by a pack of hyenas. And the hyenas were chasing and catching these antelope, and everybody was like, but you got to keep your eyes open because you never know. You're going to see coonies too. They're also called rock badgers or Syrian rabbits. They look like groundhogs. If you're from the Michigan area, you probably have them in Texas too. And they're mentioned 4 times in the Bible. They're unclean. You can't eat them. But one place it says that they're not a strong people, but they live among the rocks. So you watch for these because they're sitting on top of rocks as we go along. So I'm always pointing these things out. Sometimes a fox runs across the road. So you got to keep your eye open while we're driving along. And now all of a sudden you see a clump of trees on a hilltop. And if you look carefully, and I pointed out, there's the dome. That is the Mount of Beatitudes. And you can imagine that's where Jesus was teaching on the side of the mountain. And we'll get to there later. It's on a hillside. In the year 2000, Pope John Paul II celebrated Mass up on this hillside for 100,000 people. That was probably the most crowded that Galilee, that whole area, has ever been. Can you imagine those roads that are only made for, they were not made for crowds. 100,000 people gathered on those hillsides. John Paul II, in persona Christi, right, as a priest, he's sharing the gospel just like Jesus did. He's doing proclamation of the gospel in the very same place. So we are always the first bus to arrive at the gate. We've come up and there's the big sign and we come into the gate. It's a chain link fence and it's closed. We're always the first one because there is a Mass site that I want to get. I have it reserved months in advance, but not all the tour groups are honest about things, and they'll rush in and say, we have that Mass site, but they don't. We do. I have the paper. So you're always fighting this kind of competition, and even dishonest competition a lot of times. So we get there first. And then we see buses coming up behind us, and everybody realizes why we get up and leave early, because we want to be the first ones in. Now, my guide's name's Amr. So even if we're maybe a bus driver gets there before us, what Amr does is he tell the guy at the gate is Amr's cousin, my guide, his cousin. And so he always says to his cousin, hold the other groups up a little bit until we get in and settled. So, when you're over there, you think you've got to, Jesus says you should be as wise as fox, and you got to be smart. So this is what we do. And I know the mass site, there's about 10 mass sites, but the one I want is on the actual hillside outdoors looking out over the sea. So we always have reservations for that. So while we're waiting on the bus for the gate to open, I explain two things. And these are two important things to know when you go to Beatitudes, because this is where Jesus taught. So while we're waiting for the gate to open, I explain that while we're there, we're going to be learning about Jesus as the new Moses, because it says that Jesus went up the high mountain, he sat, and he taught the people. Well, what are you supposed to think about when you hear that? I tell people, whenever you hear Jesus on a mountain, you have to think Moses. All of the allusions in the Gospels are to Old Testament things, most of them. Matthew is writing to the Jewish people to convince them that Jesus is their Messiah. He quotes the Old Testament more than the other three put together, because he's trying to convince the Jewish people that Jesus is their king and Messiah. So what does he do? He tells them that he's the new Moses. He says that Jesus went up on a mountain. Moses went up on Mount Sinai. He sat. It says that Moses sat, and it says he judged the people. So you've got to think this is Jesus fulfilling that whole Old Testament prophecy. So Jesus now starts, and he talks, it says in the law. So he's redefining the law up here on this mountain. That's the whole point of the Beatitudes and what he's doing. And then I say, how did Jesus, when he's on this mountain, how did he speak to 20,000 people? Because it says 5,000 men, but that doesn't count women and children. Just like when he multiplied loaves and fish, it was 5,000 men. But if you put women and children and the servants there, you probably had 20,000 people together there. How does Jesus speak to 20,000 people? Now, you guys probably speak to more people in a day than Jesus spoke to in his whole lifetime. Now, think of that. That should scare the bejeevers out of you. That here we are right now speaking to more people probably than Jesus spoke to in his whole lifetime, because we use the technology of the day. I see that microphone in front of you, Tim, and I have one right here in my ears. The way Jesus did it is he used the technology of his day. When you are on the Mount of Beatitudes, it's like a natural theater. It's a conclave down to and the Romans and the Greeks always built their theaters on the shore of seas by water, because the breeze goes up from the water and it carries the voice up the mountain, up into a theater. When you go to an orchestra, are you sitting, is the orchestra up at the top playing down to you, or is it down playing up to you? It's down playing up to you. And when it says Jesus went up the mountain, I don't believe that he went all the way to the top. He went up, but then the people were sitting all up above him in like what was shaped like a theater, looking down, listening to him. And the breeze from the sea carried his voice up into the crowd so they could hear. That's the technology of his day. When I go up there at night, I can hear the fishermen 2 or 3 miles out on the Sea of Galilee fishing. You can hear their voice because the wind carries their voice up the mountain. You can hear them talking out on the sea. So this is how. So I explain these things on the bus while we're waiting. The bus time is really important because there's so many things to say to get people prepared for these sites. Okay, so we finally pull in. We show everybody where the bathrooms are. I rush up to see Sister Claudia. And Amr takes the group to the mass site to make sure. Possession. Being there is 90% of possession. So even though we have the papers, we still get rushed over there. Now, this wonderful nun who's there, we just love her. And I sent you a picture of us with her. And she's from Iraq. And one day when we came up to get the priests into the sacristy there and get them all vested and everything, we always talk to her. We bring her orbit gum and we give her gifts and things. And she says, I pray for your family. Every day I pray for you. I pray for you, she says. So one day when we were there, she was crying. just sobbing. And we said, "Sister, what's wrong?" And she says, I had the bad news today. And she says, my family was all gathered together in Iraq. They're Christians. And she said, the Muslims, they came in and they said, "Are you Christians?" And my family said, "Yes." And they shot them all, killed them all on the spot in our house. And so I said, "Sister, I'm so sad. That's horrible. Would you like to have Mass with us?" So we put our arm around her and we took her to our Mass site, and she checked out having the Mass with us. I'm out of time already. My goodness.
Sacred Sites with Steve Ray is heard live every Monday on the Guadalupe Radio Network program Morning Joy, hosted by Keith Downey. For more authentic Catholic content, go to grnonline.com/joy.